Welcome, everyone.
Hey everybody, just give you a couple seconds to everyone join in. All right, looks like it's coming in here. As we just give it another minute, I'd like to hear this is something I always like to ask everybody. If you wouldn't mind, put it in the chat. Just are you parents of class of 2026 or 2027, class of 28? Just like to kind of get an idea of the group that we're talking to tonight, and that might help cater some of the things I want to talk about or focus on maybe. Okay. Okay.
27, 28, 29,
Okay. Good. What I'm seeing is we got pre-planners.
2032.
Yeah.
Yep. All
I
right.
might I might ask Brian about 1997. That's when I graduated college.
I'm going to
Okay.
start screen sharing.
Okay. Oh, you're the parent. I got you, Brian. We're the same age, it sounds like. All right.
Right.
And just out of curiosity, and I apologize, I got one more question. Is this anyone's first time listening to a webinar from College Aid Pro? Is this your first time, or have you heard us a few times? Um,
First
is
time.
okay, all right. I just want to see, could I, ask pop quizzes, drop some pop quizzes throughout the presentation or not for bonus points, but it's probably not fair to do it to a first timer, so that's fine. Oh, Brian, though, oh, I'm going to pick on you, buddy. I'm kidding. All right, all right. Well, Kevin, do you want to maybe kick us off a little bit with some intro stuff and housekeeping rules, if you will?
Yeah, sure. So, welcome, everyone. We are College Aid Pro. Um, for any questions or any comments, please focus on using the Q&A. We're going to do our best. And JP's with us tonight. He's going to be talking about college admissions. I'm going to be talking about financial aid. But one thing you'll notice is that JP is the admissions expert and a financial aid expert, but I only do financial aid. So whenever you have an admissions question, it's going to go to JP. Whenever you have a financial aid question, it's going to get addressed by myself or JP. I just wanted to point that out. But with that being said, do you want to do your intro and I'll kick it over to you and I'll
Sure.
share our lovely photos here.
Yeah. So as Kevin said, I'm JP. I do both admissions and financial aid. That is admittedly one of the unique things about me. Because typically in our field, someone knows either or, but not usually both. But I worked in higher education for 18 plus years. I worked at the University of Southern California. I worked as a director of financial aid and worked alongside admissions, traveled all over the country with admissions, helping recruit students and all that good stuff. Uh, Even worked in the dean's office and higher administrative offices, with the provost office, and ended my tenure actually as a adjunct faculty member. So I've kind of run the gamut, in higher education, and kind of know all the front side and the back side of things. So that's put me in a unique position to provide a lot of inside strategies, if you will, and kind of know how the people who make the decisions, how they think, because I was one of those people. So anyway, so that's kind of my little shtick. And then Kevin, you want to say a little about yourself?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm one of the college planning experts here at CAP. I got into it a little bit different. I know no background in higher education, actually from financial services. And in financial services, a lot of families talk about paying for college. And I quickly fell in love with the college financial aid work and that part of the process and helping families. And that's all I do now, right? That's really my focus. So a little bit of a different path into this, but yeah, I got into it in 2018. Since then, fortunately, I've worked with a lot of families. I think somewhere over 1,000, and I would say that the whole financial aid process is, as Peg would put it, is what gets me out of bed every day. But why don't we kick it off? Enough about us, and we talk about where all, especially all of these newcomers who are with us tonight, where everyone should start. So if you do not already have a MyCap account, please go and create a free MyCap account. Actually, I'm going to put it in the chat so everyone has the link.
I can do that.
Okay. Thank you. But yeah, so everyone click the link that JP is going to put in the chat. Go and create a free MyCap account. Make sure that when you're setting up your profile, you take the time, you do it right. And we'll talk a little bit more about the software throughout the presentation. But with that being said, just take that first step. And all right, why don't we
All right.
jump into admissions?
Yeah. So, from the responses we got, it sounds like most of us are like pre-planners, maybe parents of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. So, I just want to give you some context about the what's the latest admissions trends, if you will, and how this kind of forms my strategy of what I want, and I expect my students to be doing every year. And so just some, again, some broad brushstrokes, high level stuff of the latest admissions trends. And so the first one is basically applic applications are on the rise again, like pre-pandemic levels. Of course, they took a huge dip, during in 2020, and they've been rising since then. But we're now at the stage where we're above the pre-pandemic levels. There was basically a 6%. I want to say about 6% increase last year of students who applied via just the Common App, and that translates to literally hundreds of thousands of more applicants. And if you think of basic economics, increase in supply, basically in this case, instead of demand, this created an increase in competition. And so a lot of students, I think, overestimated their chances of getting admitted to schools, and admittedly some had some harsh realities, and they fell short with their expectations. Just to give you some idea of the numbers, so like NYU, their applications have increased more than 50% in the past 5 years. Um, it's the fifth most popular school applied to. The top four uh, popular, just on how many applications received. The top four are going to be UC Irvine, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, and the top of the list is UCLA, which received over 146,000 applications, and that's just to give you an idea of like the competition that we're dealing with here. Um, it's like basically think of like those kind of schools. Everyone has A's. So if you're like, oh, I'm an A student, and I got a 1400 or a higher SAT. Yeah, so did everyone else. So you need to just understand the demographics of the competition, if you will. The next thing is, if you want to, thank you, selective majors. This is, I think most people hopefully understand this, but selective majors like business or computer science, very popular majors, they will have lower admit rates than maybe the college's average. If so, those who might be looking at common data set for admissions rates, just understand certain majors will actually be lower, could be significantly lower. Um, Even if you take like your whatever state you happen to live in, your state's, let's say, public institution, the public university, um, for example, their computer science program or their business programs admit rate could be on par with an Ivy League's admissions rate. It's can be that competitive. Just to give you again some numbers to think about. UCLA, which is obviously the most popular school there is, but their computer science program admitted fewer than 3% of its applicants. Uh, UT Austin's Macomb School of Business admits fewer than 10% of its applicants. And obviously, if you're out of state, when you're talking with like a UT, it's even far less. Um, the thing is, again, if all the applicants have like A's and they all have high SAT scores and all that stuff, you have to remember as admissions officers are looking at each application through this lens that we call fit to major. Like, is this student ready for this major? What have they done to show that they're prepared for this major? Um, Next one, the basically, I would say applying early is kind of the new normal. It's kind of almost assumed. Many top schools have filled over half their freshman class through either early binding or early action. Early decision, I meant when I said binding, early decision, which is binding, or early action plans. Um, and if anyone's seen me do in a previous webinar, um, I talk about like Tulane, great school. I have, I have nothing against them, but basically, if you apply regular admissions to Tulane, you almost have no chance of getting admitted. The vast vast majority are going to be admitted through ED or EA, and that's a well known one. But like Vanderbilt, I have some students right now who are finishing their Vanderbilt applications. Uh, this past year, they admitted 61% of their incoming class through early decision. Um, Northeastern, and in Boston, I'm friends with the president there. He and I work together at USC. But Northeastern, they plan to fill in more than half their incoming class through early decision this upcoming year. So just give you again, it's almost like just assume early is kind of the new on time. If you apply regular decision, it might be late, depending on certainly the schools that you're looking at. Next one, uh, I will say test scores have never lost their power. So I won't even say they return to power. They've always had their power. It's just schools are finally admitting it again. Um, so submitting a strong SAT or an ACT score has always given a student a measurable advantage. Even at the schools that say they're test optional or we do a holistic review, sure you do, but the data is overwhelmingly convincingly shows that you give preference. These colleges give preferences for the students who submit strong SAT or ACT scores. Now, I'll even give you a slight caveat. There are a few schools that say they're test blind. UCs and Cal States would be examples of those. Test blind is, I think, an incorrect term. They're not test blind. It's true they don't look at your ACT or an SAT test score, but those UCs and Cal States and the other schools that use that term test blind, they rely heavily on the AP test scores. All right. And so this is a big strategic play you got to think about is if these schools are relying heavily on AP test scores, you can't let your student like wait till their senior year to do all the APs. They need to load up on them in the like if the school even offers it in the sophomore year, great. Otherwise, load up on them in the junior year because they need to have scores to share. You can't wait for the senior year. And then the final thing I'll just say, and something you want to always be aware of is the let's call it the personal narrative. It still remains one of the more powerful ways to stand out. Again, especially when your test scores and your grades all look similar across all those applicants. Um, I don't like this term, but the current marketing term is your child needs to know their personal brand, and the more clearly that they can communicate that personal brand, their personal brand through the application, um, the stronger that they can help, stand out. And that's usually done through, personal statements, supplemental essays, even the activities list, the way they craft that activities list. All that matters. Um, that said, with the rise of AI, some colleges are questioning the authenticity of those written responses. I think it's a valid concern to question the authenticity of the writing. I have seen the quality of students' writing decrease tremendously over the last 10 years. And I'd say it really free falled in the last 4 or 5 years. And suddenly this year and last year even, there was quite, some students had some very polished sounding essays that don't really sound like them. So anyway, because of that concern, there is talk amongst college admissions folks that they might transition to video submissions, or at least recorded interviews, as perhaps a part of the process, or maybe even replace the essay at some point. Uh, However, or whatever mechanism they use, the bottom line is students who can articulate their genuine, authentic story, those who can do it clearly, regardless of the medium, will have a major advantage when it comes to standing out to college admissions. So all that's to say is, if you're sitting here now, maybe as the parent going, okay, what should my child be doing, for these next however many years you have left to plan for, I'm just going to kind of share with you a highlighted overview of the process I use to help families kind of plan for college, and just really just like, how do we approach this whole thing, because frankly it can be overwhelming. And to be perfectly honest, I find most families do this wrong. They do it backwards. So Kevin, can you share the next screen here? So what you're looking at is my very pragmatic, nothing sexy, nothing fancy here, but just very pragmatic but effective process of how I help families find the right colleges and ultimately boost their odds of getting admitted, and making sure it's affordable and all that kind of stuff. So there's roughly 4,000 colleges in America, right? And so what I always say is, let's first narrow it down by the schools that are an academic fit. Well, what do I mean by academic fit? And can you hit the space bar? In short, I'm going to say academic fit is they have to offer the major, the program the child wants to study. I'm a big believer, a big proponent, and the student should know why they're going to college. Colleges love this notion of going, hey, it's okay to come undecided. Hey, it's okay to not know what you want to do. We'll help you figure out. I could curse, but it's not true. They don't want to help your child figure it out. This is how they make more money. This is how we put kids in classes they don't need because we need enrollment to keep their accreditation up. Or, oh, 4-year degree? No, it's going to take 5, 6 years to get that 4-year degree. Colleges love this idea of undecided. Undecided didn't exist until the 80s when Parent Plus loans came about, and that's when college became this. Well, let's do what you want. So I could go on a whole history lesson of higher education on this, but anyway, need to know kind of the why in its sense of that direction, and therefore does the school offer the right academic program? And then the other way I'll say it too is, if you're an A student, you probably want to go to school with A students. If you're a C student, it's probably not realistic to say, oh, I'm going to go apply to the Ivies and get in. Um, you need to find a school that's with your academic peers, if you will. There's other things too, like, what type of learning environment do you work best in? Does a student learn best in, from like, reading textbooks and listening to a lecture? Okay, if so, that's gonna work for many universities. But if they're the type that goes, hey, I learn best from doing, getting hands on, then you need to look for those schools that offer that kind of learning environment. So anyway, all of this to say is, you want to find schools that are an academic fit. Let that be the first filter. Narrow down this 4,000 schools first by an academic fit, then narrow down that list by financial fit. And we'll talk more about financial aid, but I'm just going to summarize it as, you need to know your budget. and then need to know, will these schools fit your budget? Okay. If we want to take it more advanced, then we can talk about ROI and all of that good stuff. But the simplest thing is you got to know your budget. And I'll be honest, parents, hear me for a moment. For 25 years that I've been doing this and working in financial aid and all this stuff, when I'd say parents, we need to determine your budget and know, can you afford this? No parent ever listened to me. Those days are over. Hear me. Those days are over. The Parent Plus loan is what enabled parents to make terrible financial decisions for the last 30 years. Big Beautiful Bill has changed the Parent Plus loan. You don't have a blank check anymore. You have caps, you have limits. You have to qualify just to pay for college like you would have to qualify to buy a house. You need to know your budget. I will harp on that till I'm blue in the face. But you need to know what schools are going to fit your budget. So you need to figure out your budget. I don't care what the sticker price of the school is. That's a different conversation. You need to know what's the net price, what your price will be, and will that fit your budget? You need to have a game plan. So anyway, you figure out which schools first are an academic fit. Then you take that list, you narrow it down by which ones are a financial fit. Now you have a good list, and you can pass that on to your child and say, go shop. Shop for these schools that we've already vetted that are a good academic fit, that are a good financial fit. You can shop based upon your own personal fit criteria. And that can be anything with the student. I want to be far away from mom and dad. I want to be close to mom and dad. I want to be at a big campus, a small campus. I want to be at a big football school, or I want to be at a nerdy research school. Whatever, right? This is their journey, not yours, not mine. Let them shop based upon their personal fit criteria. You can rest easy because if you pre-vet the list in this manner, they're not picking a bad choice. All right. Let them shop based upon their personal fit criteria. And I say try to get it narrowed down. Ask my students, try to narrow it down to their top 10. It doesn't have to be exactly 10, but I grew up with David Letterman, so I the top 10 is always in my head. But some of my most successful students that got into phenomenal schools that had that list narrowed down to like 6. If you get over like up to 15, I'm like, I don't think your child really researched the schools. So get it down to their top 10, and then you work on your admission strategy. Okay. So let's talk about admission strategy briefly here. Um, Next page, and go ahead and hit the space bar again. I will be honest, unlike a lot of other companies, and I'm going to tell you the strategy for admissions depends upon the selectivity of the colleges. For example, my undergrad alma mater, which I'm very biased, and I think anyone here would say they're biased about their own undergrad college. I went to Iowa State for undergrad. I think it's the greatest school in the country. I think it's got the most opportunities for public school, all that great stuff. But at the same time, it is not a selective school. It's going to admit most applicants as long as they have meet the certain GPA requirements. It's not very selective. And when a school is not very selective, I really only have to work on what I'm going to call the defensive strategies. But when you start looking at schools that like where I did my master's at USC or a Stanford or a Harvard or any of the Ivies or those selective schools, the defensive strategy is not enough. That if you rely on just your defense, you're not going to win. You got to have also the offensive strategy. Okay. So what do I mean by defensive and offensive strategy? Can you go ahead and share that next slide? In simplest terms, I'm going to say your defensive strategy is your academics, GPA, but at the same time, it has to be in the context of some academic rigor. I always get asked, like, should we take the APs, in the harder classes, or is it better to take the easier classes and have a higher GPA? And I'm like, you should do both. You should take the harder classes and have a high GPA, right? That'd be the ideal, but some situations that's not going to happen. And like, what are you going to pick? There's one right answer. Are you going to go the easier classes to get a boost in GPA, or are you going to go with the harder classes and potentially get a lower GPA? There is, in admissions eyes, one correct way to do that. If you can't do both, you got to do it one way. So you got to know what you're doing, right? Test scores, like I said, you want to be at, if you look up the common data set, you want to be at least above the 25th percentile of the reported the scores, whether it's ACT or SAT, it doesn't matter. The schools value them equally. Um, but that's the defense. It's the thing. It was the academics, right? But then again, if you're applying to selective schools where admissions rates 50% or less, it's a flip of a coin. You need to have a strong offensive strategy. That's where you need to know your personal brand. The child needs to know their genuine, authentic self. They need to be able to articulate who they are, why they want to do this or that, why it matters to them. How are they going to contribute to the campus? How are they going to contribute to the community there? They need to be able to explain that, and that's going to help them stand out. That's going to require fit to major extracurricular activities. So again, if I'm going to major, I say I want to become a mechanical engineer, and and my extracurricular activities are all about, let's say, band or football and all that stuff. Fine stuff, but boring. Everyone does that. Not going to make you stand out, and it doesn't fit the major, right? So, especially when you're applying to these competitive majors, you need to have the strategic extracurriculars that fit that lens. Okay. Obviously, you got to be able to write well. You got to be able to tell your story. Again, articulate your personal brand. Letters of recommendation are often overlooked. Usually, students go to the teachers that they get the good grades in. What's that teacher going to say? Good student. Okay, nothing meaningful there. Um, so if your child is writing about like their values or the qualities about themselves, let's say are persistency or resiliency and all that stuff, well then have the teach right go to the teacher where the student struggled in the class and like went to office hours, asked for extra help and guidance and put in the extra effort. And that teacher can write about like this student does have resiliency, does have that made that extra effort. You want teachers who can say something a little bit more meaningful, right? Basically, the students need to connect with their teachers. And then the other thing is, I'll just simply say demonstrate interest. What's most students do? If maybe go to the admission site, click on the link that says tell me more, and you get the emails. Do they read the emails? Probably not, but you should, because most schools are tracking, like, did you click the email? How long were you on our website? All that stuff. They track that kind of stuff. Are the students following them on social media? Are they engaging on their post on social media? More importantly, are they networking? I know kids don't like to use that word network, but okay, are they building relationships with the college admissions officer? The colleges have Most colleges assign a regional admissions officer throughout the whole country. So for your state, doesn't matter if you're applying to school across the country, there's going to probably be a regional admissions officer assigned to your school. Is your child building a relationship with them? Are they reaching out to them? Are they engaging them? You don't want that admissions person to download that application from, let's say, Common App, and when they see the name, we don't want this to be the first time that admissions person read their name. You don't want them going, oh, I wonder who this kid is. You want admissions to already know who this child is. So these, I'm kind of giving you some of the advanced stuff that I do with my kids and strategies, but this is the stuff you need to think about if you are looking at any remotely selective school. Long gone are the days when we could just, well, back in my day, we fill out paper applications, and you send them off, but we can't just do that anymore. If you want to stand out in this competitive environment, you need to do all the extra stuff. You need to really demonstrate and show that you're all in. So anyway, this is kind of like a highlighted overview of what I say. Now, just to kind of run through some stuff, because I know we had some different ages and different grades here that we said, but so like if we're talking about, let's say, freshmen, right? Obviously get to know your high school counselor, map out your 4 years. But I like to have my freshmen take a PSAT test. This can help to kind of see, are they ready for AP classes, right? And start joining every kind of possible club they're remotely interested in. Like this is freshman year is that year to go ahead and like go wide and try a bunch of different things. And something I really believe in and have my kids do is even create a vision board every year. Actually, you're going to see this, but kind of what do they see themselves doing that year? Where do they see themselves at? What do they want to accomplish? Right. As far as 10th graders, let's go on to the next one. it- again, they're going to now refine their 3-year course plan. Yeah, here's something that you need to think about. If you're applying to selective colleges, regardless of the major, it could be a major in communications, um, it could be a major in history. If you're applying to a selective colleges want to see your child took biology, chemistry, physics, and calculus. Even if it has nothing to do with their intended major, selective colleges want to see those courses. So make sure that is woven into the plan. AP stats not going to cut it at a selective school, right? So you want to make sure you're taking the right classes and again the academic rigor. If your school offers APs, start taking it. This is when we start. Also in 10th grade is when we start to narrow down the activities and not such a wide list and start finding our focus. Things I have my students do is we go through a values assessment, like what's important to them. I go through an aptitude assessment. There's only a couple like legitimate certified aptitude assessments that exist in the country, and I have them go through that to go, how is your brain wired? How does it think? How does it learn? They need to start really developing a stronger sense of who they are, right? Um, let's go to junior years. So for the juniors, again, refine your course plan. This is when, if you haven't been able to take APs, start taking the APs. Don't push them off to senior year. Take them now. I have my kids as soon as the algebra 2 is out of the way, I have them prepared to take the SAT or ACT. Again, doesn't matter, but take it twice in the junior year, once in the fall, and ideally I say in the spring, or push it to like June, the summer after. Let Not May, because they're doing APs and all the actual AP tests. Um, I hate passion projects. It's a very, very popular term that's a good marketing term. Can't stand it. Admissions folks I know can't stand it. Um, would be a more accurate term is purpose projects. We can talk more about that in another webinar, but start pursuing their purpose, right? Make impact with their extracurricular activities. Not Don't seek a title. Everyone says, oh, I want to become a president of whatever club. It doesn't really matter. Most of those position titles are just kind of in name. And still, think of how many high schools are in the country. You 10,000 other kids are going to have that same title. So don't pursue the title, pursue impact. What are you going to achieve in those clubs or whatever your extracurricular activity is? Okay. Seniors, I don't think we had any parents of seniors here, but senior year is kind of when you're wrapping everything up, so to speak. Go ahead and share the next slide if you can. And so again, this is when we're just kind of wrapping up like any purpose project, any of the volunteering or work, or any of the extracurriculars. Definitely should have the college list finalized and like right now my rising seniors, or my seniors, they're not rising so much I guess now, but like they're done with their personal statement. We're finalizing, tweaking their supplemental essays. Our goal is to be able to submit applications by the end of September, early October. I'd say not many, a fifth of my seniors right now, class of 2026 students, a fifth have already submitted their applications. I already know of a couple that, because they applied rolling. I love rolling, by the way. Applied rolling decision. They already been accepted to a couple schools. Already got a couple wins under the belt. First week of September. That's what we want, right? Take the pressure off. So anyway, that's a quick highlight here of what I suggest and what I kind of have my students do. But I obviously ran through this. I want to give Kevin some time to talk about financial aid and all that stuff. But I hope this was helpful. And if I'll check the Q&A, see if there's any Q&A.
We I think one question in the webinar chat. One question, but let's talk a little bit about financial aid, and getting a good understanding of this is going to allow you to kind of attack that part of the process that JP mentioned earlier, which is financial fit. Well, thank you for the emojis. Those are much appreciated. But so it's good to understand that when we're talking about financial aid, we're not just talking about need-based grants, right? Or Pell grants or anything like that. We're ultimately talking about when colleges offer a discount of some sort. And there's different ways that they can do that. Need-based grants are one way, and need-based grants are solely based on your income and assets, which are reported on the financial aid forms. Now, merit-based scholarships, they have nothing to do with your income or assets. Those are totally based on your student's talent profile, your student's GPA, your student's test scores, right? That's what plays a role and obviously is what merit scholarships are based off of. And then in terms of self-help, it isn't free money. It's not money that you're getting that lowers the cost. It has to be either paid back with interest or worked for, right? So although self-help, it's a resource, it's by no means the same as merit scholarships or need-based grants, because both of those categories, that's free money you don't have to pay back. So why don't we take a look at what discounts actually kind of look like in a real life scenario? So we've got University of Washington, so a public school. This scenario, the family lives in Washington. And then we also have an expensive private school, which is Gonzaga. As you can see, there's a huge cost difference. University of Washington is $35,000 a year, and Gonzaga is $77,000 a year. The family student aid index, right? That the number that we'll actually get a little bit more in depth on in a second, but your student aid index is the number that is going to be used to determine how much you qualify for in need-based grants. It's $30,000. So the difference between the cost of Washington and that $30,000, they don't really qualify for too much, right? There's not too much room there. And University of Washington's a public school, so there's probably not any money there either. But Gonzaga, on the other hand, the difference between that $30,000 student aid index and the full cost, the $77,000 cost of attendance, it allows them to have a lot of financial need, right? You see on the screen is $47,000 of financial need. Now, with that, it allows them to qualify for a lot of merit scholarships, which, sorry, that's based on the student's academics. It allows them to qualify for need-based grants as well, right? It allows them to get a loan subsidy and ultimately bring the cost down at Gonzaga almost, not the exact same, but very similar to the in-state public option, University of Washington. We see this all the time for families we work with. And usually it's, part of the process is identifying the schools for a student that will actually discount like this, but it's real, right? And don't just assume based on a sticker price, it's going to be too expensive. Now, in terms of financial aid, it's going to be very important that as soon as possible, you understand if you do or don't qualify for need-based aid. And the formula on the screen, the cost of attendance is the full sticker price at a college, but the student aid index, that's the number that, based on your income, based on your assets, is going to be used to determine how much demonstrated need you have, how much need is there for the college to potentially meet. And in some cases, right, there might be no need. And that's why it's good to figure that out now, because it allows you to figure out how to approach the process. And in other cases, maybe you have a lot of demonstrated need, and that's going to be a focus for you when building the school list, when figuring out what type of money would be best for your family. Anything you want to add here, JP?
I think the point I always want to make is the cost of attendance. One, it's not the bill, right? Cost of attendance is tuition, room and board, and all the stuff but it's also incidentals that the school tries to say, hey, you should budget X amount for travel. You should travel. Budget X amount for various things that they're not going to charge. So just keep in mind the cost of attendance isn't the bill. It's going to actually be higher than the bill. They do try to put in some of the other stuff. So yeah, I've had parents who are like, "Well, geez, when I got the bill, it didn't match my financial aid offer letter. What said the cost of attendance was going to be." I'm like, it never will. There's other incidentals built in, But and another thing I always say is the student aid index for anybody who was wondering, or maybe depending on when you went to college, y- you probably are used to thinking it was the EFC, the estimated family contribution. They changed the title. They went. It was actually student aid index in the 90s. We just went retro and went back to the student aid index because when it was called estimated family contribution, parents tended to think that, oh, you're calculating how much we can afford. No, we're not. Student aid index is a relative measure of your financial strength relative to poverty guidelines. That's the most accurate number, most accurate way to describe it. It's not necessarily affordable, which is why it's so important to be strategic. And Kevin will talk about this in the next few slides, but be strategic on how you position your money to maybe try to lower the SAI in hopes to increase your need. But that's still, even that game is short-sighted. You got to still do it in the context of going which schools are going to give you the money, right? So it's more complex than what we're probably making this. This literally is a college level course. This screen right here, it's a grad course for those who want to get in this industry. So this is oversimplifying it.
I think that it's a good point. It really is. It is very complex. We are trying to make it very simple. And I just put in the chat again, one of the things when you do create your free MyCap account, it tells you your SAI, but it also tells you what discounts particular colleges are going to give you. So it's really helpful. It's allowing you to kind of understand this specifically for your family in a much simpler way without having to understand all the details and all the nuts and bolts about, well, if you qualify for $40,000 of need, not every college is going to give you that $40,000, right? You might not get any from the college. And that's going to be different from every college because they all have their own business model and they all give money differently. So just something to keep in mind. Now, with your student aid index, it's good to understand what ultimately is going to essentially be counted, what's going to be factored in. And when it comes to reporting assets, your retirement accounts do not go on the FAFSA. They are not factored into your student aid index. Think about like a 401k, think about an IRA. Also think about cash value life insurance policies, annuities, right? There's different types of qualified retirement accounts that just don't count for the sake of financial aid. Now, when it comes to home equity, the FAFSA does not look at your primary home. However, and we'll go more in detail on the other financial aid form, the CSS profile, in a bit, that's another form that some colleges require from College Board that does look at your home equity, right? That is part of the equation and part of what the colleges are going to assess in terms of what you can pay. Now, when it comes to a second home, yes, the equity though, not the whole value, right? It would be the value less any debt. And when it comes to a business or farm, it actually, as of this big beautiful bill that we've already referenced before, family-owned businesses, fewer than 100 full-time employees, and commercial fisheries, right? Farms too, they're going to be excluded from the FAFSA, but they will always go on the CSS profile. Now, who owns these particular accounts makes a very big difference in terms of how they're treated. Parental assets, they're counted at a much, much lower percentage than student assets. To be exact, on the FAFSA, it's 5.64%. Now, when it comes to 529s, I think a lot of families we meet with always get confused and think of 529, that's my student's account. It isn't. 529s are parental assets. So those are always going to get favorable treatment. In terms of grandparent 529s, those are not included, right, at all. So if a grandparent owns a 529, that is not included on the FAFSA. If you have other 529s for maybe like younger students, that is also not included on the FAFSA. Now, a little bit different from 529s would be UGMAs and UTMAs. These are student accounts, right? So if you're a student, and if you know this acronym, probably have this account for your student, but these accounts are treated as student assets, and student assets are assessed around 20-25%. So it's really different than how parent assets are assessed. And make sure that you're being strategic, right? You're thinking about how you can best position yourself to qualify for money, including with jointly owned accounts. And the value of all these assets, right? Even if you have 2029, 2027, 2028 graduate, doesn't matter. It's on the day you file the forms. So there's usually some big opportunities, right, to make some adjustments before October of your student's senior year to essentially help you qualify for more financial aid. And it is also something where you want to consider the tax year that's going to be used too. And I'll mention that here as well. So when looking at the tax year for the financial aid forms, it's always going to be the prior year. And if you were to think, well, my students can graduate in 2026, subtract 2, 2024 would be the base year. If your student's going to graduate high school, whatever year that is, just subtract 2 from it, and that will be your base year for the financial aid forms. And the number that they're primarily looking at is your adjusted gross income, which is line 11 of the 1040. And, we get this question all the time. I have credit card debt. I have loans. Do they ask for this at all? No. But right, there are ways to plan for this and try and factor this in. And that's something that we always try and consider for the families that we work with. Now, students have an income allowance, meaning that they can make a certain amount of money before it counts against them for federal student aid. And that is $11,510 for the class of 25, 26. That it changes every year. Any dollar above and beyond that, for the sake of federal student aid, is assessed at 50 cents per dollar. So it could really negatively impact how much financial aid your student receives if you're qualifying for quite a bit. And in terms of income allowance, it's very, very minimal, but it mirrors the poverty guidelines. Now, a lot of families who talk to us don't qualify for need-based aid, and that's okay, right? You just need to have a different approach. You need to focus on schools that offer merit scholarships, so schools that are going to reward your student for doing well in high school. Also, you should focus on value schools, right? And schools that are going to compete for your student and maybe increase those scholarships during the appeals process to really get that cost down. Now, one of the main reasons that you don't want to skip the FAFSA and the CSS profile is because some colleges require them for scholarships. But in addition to that, there's more reasons than that, right? You never know what's going to happen. Your income may change. You might need to appeal. Your student may want to take the federal direct student loan, which you have to fill out the FAFSA to get that. So, I mean, it helps them build credit.
Same with the Parent Plus loan. You
Yeah,
have to do the FAFSA.
yeah,
And to point you made, there are some, I'm going to call them jerk schools that, like as Kevin said, like if let's say let's say your present financial circumstances are you're in a position where you're like, you know what, I can pay for it. I could write a check and I'm good. But that could be today. I've had so many families, especially this last year. I'd say a fifth of my families almost where a parent lost a job and it significantly changed their circumstances and they needed to, like, we had to do appeals and all that. But there are some schools who basically say, hey, if you don't apply for financial aid freshman year, maybe something happens sophomore junior year. Hey, too bad, we're not going to consider it because you didn't apply for financial aid the freshman year.
yeah.
It's like it's ruthless, but some schools are that way. So I have never told a family don't apply for financial aid freshman year. It's the answer is we always do, regardless of your circumstances.
Regardless, unless you truly want to just write a blank check and you don't care and you're just not going to ever want a discount or anything, you always want to apply for financial aid. You have to look at this big picture. 4 years, things can happen. But I've come across families that are appealing for merit scholarships and the school gives them a hard time because they didn't fill out their FAFSA. And it's like, you didn't provide us that information. So it's definitely something that you want to do. Now, when it comes to merit scholarships, no student is going to get a merit scholarship at an Ivy League school, regardless of what you've heard from, friends or colleagues or coworkers or anything like that. NESCAC schools, they don't either, right? Some schools just don't give merit scholarships. and then some discount for every student. And this is, again, it's going to be completely based on your student's academic profile, and it's going to be helpful to figure all these details out early on in the process. And again, we'll go into this offer in a bit, but MyCap, we put that link in a few times in the chat. That will also project out merit scholarships. Now, with merit-based aid, typically speaking, the scholarships are going to be for all 4 years, and they're awarded by the Office of Admissions, and they're kind of just an incentive to get your student to attend that school, right? To commit, to lower the cost. And most of the time, I mean, pretty much all the time, they're going to be based on grades and test scores. And
I will counter. You could be like a phenomenal cellist, and if you're going to like say a music degree,
yeah, but wouldn't you categorize those as more like talent?
yeah, talent,
That's-
yeah,
Yeah, so
fair.
like there's talent scholarships as well. There's athletic scholarships too. We're not, that's a little, your student can get that, right? And I remember there was one year where a school here, I'm in New Jersey, on the East Coast, Sacred Heart was giving $10,000 to any student who would join the chorus. So like, right, the chorus or choir, but they're,
They would have paid me 10,000 not to join.
yeah. But I mean, like, it's true, right? You can get money for other things. It doesn't, I've seen schools give money for community service, but it's just, it's more categories of scholarships that we're talking about. Okay. Now, I mentioned value schools briefly, but there are some really, really good examples of value schools. Think the CUNY schools, think Purdue, BYU. Those are some great opportunities, and I'm not saying that they're cheap, right? 40,000 for the CUNY schools, Purdue's 46,000. Not super, but relative to the other potential options, they provide a lot of value for the money. And I can say, even where I'm at in New Jersey, and I also know California, many states, schools are 35 to 40 grand. So you're not too far off. In addition to that, when it comes to honors colleges, some of the public schools have really, really good, strong competitive programs that, one, could just be, great for your student, and two, could allow them to qualify for more money.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I was gonna say, think of it this way: if your child wants that private school experience, but you have a public school budget, then you're looking for like a UCI, honors college. You're looking for like ASU's Barrett College, Rutgers, their honors. Like these are some of the top honors programs in the country at public schools, and they're gonna get that private school experience, that extra little love, if you will, that private schools give kids, but at the public school price.
yeah. Now, when it comes to applying for financial aid, um, it, it's going to be a slightly different. It could be a slightly different process for every single school, and I think it's pretty safe to say every school on your students list is going to require the FAFSA. So for sure you have to do that. Now, above and beyond the FAFSA, you might have the CSS profile, right? That's going to be a private financial aid form from College Board. The college, like a Princeton or a Chicago, they have their own institutional forms. And then in addition to that, some colleges want copies of your tax returns, right? And something called iDoc, where you upload tax documents, some non-tax filer statements, you name it. You never want to miss a deadline, though. It's going to be super important that, priority deadlines, you get all of these things done early. We talked about trying to get everything, JP with his students, he gets everything done, September, October. You want to get the financial aid forms done. They don't have to be done at the exact same time. They don't even open until October 1st, but you want to get them done pretty much by November 1st. And no college is going to be proactive and remind you and say, please apply for financial aid by this date. It's going to be on you to figure those dates out and make sure you don't miss anything. But again, a safe bet, do everything by 11/1. Now, when it comes to the FAFSA, you can go and create your account tonight, right? Studentaid.gov. You're going to have a parent account, and you're also going to have a student account. But you're not going to be able to actually fill the form out until October 1st of your student's senior year. And we already talked through the tax year, so you should figure out now what your base year will be. Whatever your students graduating high school classes, just subtract 2. that's going to be your base year. And if you're not in your base year, might have the opportunity to qualify for more money, depending on obviously your tax situation, but that's something to consider as well. Now, there's always confusion when it comes to divorced families or separated families, like who does this, right? Who files the forms? Because on the FAFSA, it's only one parent in that situation. Um, on the FAFSA it would be the custodial parent, and the exact wording is the parent who provides the most financial support. But I think there's a lot of reasons and a lot of ways to argue one parent versus the other. So that's important to keep in mind too. And that's a really, really big planning opportunity as well. If you are separated, if you are divorced, and sometimes you're recently divorced or recently separated, and your base tax year doesn't even line up to your current marital situation. So definitely things to consider. Now, the CSS profile, this additional financial aid form that I talked about, that too should go live October 1st every year, right? But you would not fill it out until October of your student's senior year. And somewhere around 250 schools require this additional form. And really the big differences are the amount of questions and kind of the detail that they ask for. One of the main ones is that they look at home equity and they treat it the same as your checking account. Now, not to get into the nitty gritty, but some schools that use the CSS profile don't use it. Some schools look at it and they say, well, we're only going to use 1.2 times your income or 2 times your income. And then some schools like NYU and Boston College say, we're going to use all of your home equity. Every single dollar you have in home equity, we're going to count that at 5%. Now, for divorced or separated families, when there's two households, there is a non-custodial profile, a additional CSS profile where they're going to collect that other parent's information. And then for any family who owns a business, usually there's tons of planning opportunities to qualify for more money, but they ask you way more in terms of details on the CSS profile. You're like, when you started the business, what's the value? I think it's fair to say we see most families mess up their business value. And that's usually a big opportunity for planning as well. Now, in some situations where, let's say, the non-custodial parent, pretty severe situations like no contact at all, no financial support or abuse, you can get a non-custodial waiver. And it just, the short of it is it's a way more complex form. They ask way more in terms of questions, and the colleges that use this form, they typically give a lot more of their own money, which is why they're asking these questions. To get to this form, you would use your students' College Board credentials, the same that they would use to register for the SAT. Now, in terms of appeals, it has to be my favorite part of the process, but appeals, I love it. I know we're not supposed to call it a negotiation or anything like that, because it's definitely more strategic than that, but I don't know, it feels good getting more money from these colleges. So when it comes to appeals, first off, you wouldn't even do this until you have the financial aid packages. So it might not happen until spring of your student's senior year. But at the end of the day, you're making a really compelling argument. You're sharing your story, you're sharing some reasons as to why you deserve more money. And there's many cases where you may want to say, you know what, I need $5,000 more, or you know what, I lost my job and I know that based on these numbers, I should qualify for X amount more in financial aid. So there are situations where you do want to ask for a specific amount of money. And one of the big strategies that a lot of families use is leveraging competing offers. But first off, it has to be from the right colleges. Not, you can't just pick any college and say, oh, they gave us a better offer, will you match it? It has to be the right schools, but also you have to show those offers. They're not going to take your word for it. For any of these things on appeal, they're not going to take your word for it. Situations are, I think, a lot of the times more complex than what's just reflected on the tax return. So you may need to explain additional expenses. You may need to explain, kind of other circumstances. And it doesn't hurt to follow up, maybe to appeal more than once, and definitely be persistent. And JP, you were a director of financial aid.
Yeah,
You've even
yeah,
said,
yeah.
so chime
I,
in here.
I'm gonna say this is what I would say, and I like your one point you made. I don't care how sad a story is. I don't care, what happened. If you cannot document it, I can't approve the appeal. Documentation reigns supreme. Second, I can't tell you how bad people write their appeal letters. I've seen, families, they'll maybe come to me for and they'll be like, hey, can you review the appeal letter I want to send to the school, and like, and they tell me their circumstances, and I understand it. I read the appeal letter, I'm like, this will get nowhere. You worded this poorly, you described this poorly, you need to know how financial aid folks think. You need to put things in their terms, and speak their jargon, if you will. And I've literally had families where they said, my I sent this appeal, I got nothing. I took their appeal, rewrote it the correct way, and we got tens of thousands of dollars. So how you present the appeal matters as well. So you could have all the merit, all the right reasons for an appeal, but if you don't present it right, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, you have to know, you have to sound like you know what you're talking about, and you have to know eh, they're going to want proof. They're going to want details. They're going to want everything. You have to outline it correctly. And to your point, I think a lot of times why we're so successful with appeals is because we know how to present it. And I will say this year, collectively, we're so proud as a team. I think we got somewhere around $5 million extra on appeal. That literally means $5 million in savings for the families that we worked with, because of appeals. That doesn't even mean the original offers. So just to show how important this part of the process is. Now, I know we're running a little bit late. I want to spend 1 minute showing the software, and then I also just want to explain a few things as a thank you for everyone who attended tonight. But okay, so let me share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Got logged out.
No, no worries. It's just something I want to say as you log in. The thing with, if you have a MyCap software and all that stuff, again, I see families get so focused on like, what's my SAI,
Mhm.
or things like that. I'm going to tell you that if you want to be successful at this, you need to focus on, again, what's your budget. Use the software to establish that, and then plug in all your information and let the software calculate what the school's net cost will be, and show you relative what that looks like compared to your budget. That, if you focus on that, that's going to help you. As far as when it comes to like the strategies of qualifying for more financial aid or this or that, the software is not going to teach you strategy. That's 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 what we do. But the software is a great snapshot for where you're presently at.
The outputs are based on the inputs, right? So if there's changes or anything that have to be made, that's not something that it'll be able to tell you. But a really good starting point, everyone on this call, create a MyCap account. You'll get your SAI, but to JP's point, yes, knowing your SAI, it's great, it's helpful, but just look at the net costs. I mean, by putting your basic information in, where we don't ask, for pages of info, you'll be able to see what we're projecting each school that your student's interested in to cost. And we'll even tell you where that money's coming from, right? So like in this example, cost of attendance at American 83,000, we're projecting this hypothetical family for it to cost 60, and that's coming from a merit scholarship. And in the software, right, you're going to be able to see all of the merit scholarships that a college has to offer based on GPA, test scores, etc. And then another really cool thing that you'll be able to see, talking about like affordability and fit, this is our affordability grid here. And you can see like highly selective and caution, it's going to be too expensive. This family doesn't have any schools that are ideal. And for us, ideal means no loans, right? And that's a problem. The only school they have that is the federal direct student loan only, meaning 27,000 in student loans, is University of Pennsylvania. And obviously that's incredibly difficult to get into. So got to have a really, really well balanced list here that checks all the boxes. So, all right, let me stop sharing that. And let me explain, as a thank you, what everyone can do. So a couple of things. First off, we think it's really important for families to understand how they should approach this process and how much financial aid they qualify for, and if they're missing anything. And also, maybe if we can help you, right? Like if we could save you tens of thousands of dollars. I think JP, you're the one who did the calculation, but our average class of 2025 family saved, it was $123,284, if my memory serves me correctly. So if you were to meet with us, we'll at least be able to tell you, one, kind of what you qualify for. Two, in addition to that, like how you should approach it. We talked about merit. We talked about value schools. We talked about if you qualify for need-based aid grants, how your family should approach this process. So to do that, you do have to book the meeting by tonight, and you have to meet with us by, it would be September 13th. You'll see that here in the calendar. Now, in addition to that, just know we have two requirements, two main ones. One is you have a fully completed MyCap account. That allows us to kind of talk you through your situation and figure out what you qualify for and if we can even help you. And then in addition to that, we ask that both parents are on the call because we do limit these calls to one per family. We do work, JP, he works with many families for college admissions. And I think it's good to point out that JP was closed since January for the class of 2026. So imagine if anyone has a class of 2027, probably not gonna be able to work with you too much longer. And the same for 28, 29. So it's important to get started early with admissions. On financial aid, we've got a great team of pros, myself, JP included. We work one-on-one with families to figure out the strategy, to figure out how to get money, to figure out how to pay for college. And then let's say that your family is a total DIY family. Well, if that's the case, we've got the software, right? We've got the tools, we've got our premium membership, and you'll be able to sign up for that right here. JP, would you be able to put that in? By the way, tomorrow you'll also have the recording. Would you be able to put this in the chat?
The landing page?
Yep.
Yep, I did it earlier. I'll do it again.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you. But yeah, so anyone who wants to take us up on that, let us tell you basically where you currently stand, and how you should approach this. Just please book it by midnight tonight. But I think that I hope everyone liked our what we've covered, our presentation. I'm really sorry. I realized that we're a little bit over time here, so I sincerely apologize about that. But yeah, anything you want to add, JP?
Yeah, I'll just say it this way: is someone who worked in higher education, there's all the time mottos scrolled across, scribbled on campuses, and it's something to the effect of knowledge is power. No, it's not. Knowledge in of itself is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Now, here's where I'm going with this. I know you're busy. I'm busy. I just moved cross country and it's
Really?
admission season, and like I'm working 12, 13-hour days. I get it. You're busy. But if you don't act, you're going to overspend on college. If and when I say don't act, I mean like you just took everything we say and you put it off to the side. At minimum, set up that MyCap account. At minimum, put your information, get a snapshot of where you're at. This class of 2025, my average savings, just for my families, was a little over 31,000 a year. They didn't pay a dime. I saved them far more money than they ever paid me. Right? The kids got accepted to great schools. If you don't want to overpay, talk to a pro. That's all I'm going to say. Take action. The sooner I had a client this year who followed us for 3 years, went to webinars for 3 years, just assumed they weren't going to get financial aid, and then on a whim they signed up with me, and I looked at their situation. I was like, had you signed up 2 years ago, even I could have helped you significantly reduce the cost of college, but because you waited too late, waited to the reportable year, I can't help you. So proactive strategy is so much more effective than reactive, like, oh crap, what do we do now? So that's all I'll say.
No,
Um,
it's a really good point. The earlier you start this, I think the less stressed you're going to be. You're going to know how you're going to do this. I think a large part of this whole thing, it's a very stressful process. You need to JP's point, don't push this off, right? Start thinking about it. Even if you have a 2029 grad, start thinking about this and just take action. But thank you, everyone. Again, everyone will get the recording tomorrow. You have the details to book time with us, to get a premium membership, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation. All right. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.